Leo stared at the contact on his phone screen, a single word, boyfriend, etched beneath a generic gray icon. A crease formed between his eyebrows. After a long, drawn-out moment of hesitation, he carefully pressed the call button. The line only rang twice before someone picked up. He spoke quickly, his voice tight with uncertainty, asking if he was speaking to his boyfriend. A sudden, deep silence met his question from the other end. That probably meant he was right. Just as a wave of doubt began to wash over him, a low, relaxed male voice finally answered, a lazy drawl in his tone. "Of course, baby." The affectionate and effortless reply made Leo let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. He'd found the right person. It seemed he really did have a boyfriend. He then asked if the man could come pick him up from St. Jude's Medical Center, room F01. The voice on the phone sharpened slightly, questioning if he was sick. Leo felt a flush of embarrassment as he explained that he'd been hit on the head earlier that day and was experiencing some memory loss. The doctors had assured him his brain scans showed nothing abnormal, but as a precaution, they insisted a family member come get him before he could be discharged. His parents were out of state, he added, so he figured a boyfriend counted as family. Another brief pause hung in the air before the man's voice returned, slow and reassuring this time. He told Leo not to be afraid, that he'd be there soon. The man's promise was a steadying anchor in the swirling chaos of Leo's mind. From the moment he'd been brought to the hospital, everything had felt disjointed and fuzzy. All his recent memories were gone. The doctor suggested the partial amnesia was a result of intense stress and fear from the accident. The most bewildering part was forgetting he even had a boyfriend. He had no idea what kind of man he was with, but his voice was undeniably pleasant. Leo hoped he was handsome. He'd always been a guy with a weakness for a good-looking face. Just as he was starting to nervously pick at the cuticles on his thumbs, the door to his hospital room was pushed open. A tall, long-legged young man stepped inside. He was dressed entirely in black, with a face so perfectly structured it seemed sculpted. His features were clean and sharp, carrying an air of effortless confidence. Leo's mind blanked. That was Ethan, the star quarterback of their university's football team. He wondered why on earth Ethan was here. While Leo was still trying to process the situation, Ethan was already standing before his bed. His gaze swept over Leo, from head to toe, his eyes holding an emotion Leo couldn't quite decipher. Suddenly, Ethan leaned in close, so close that Leo could see the intricate dark patterns in his irises. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" he murmured. His relaxed, deep voice was the same one from the phone. It seemed this was really him. This was his boyfriend. Still, a thread of disbelief lingered. Leo asked him again, a little shyly, if he was truly his boyfriend. He explained that even with the memory loss, he knew who Ethan was. He was a popular student at their school, and everyone knew he was straight. Ethan didn't even flinch. He quietly clarified that he used to be, but then he met Leo and fell for him instantly. He confessed that he'd pursued Leo for a long time before he finally agreed to a date. As he spoke, he pulled his phone from his pocket and tapped the screen to life. The lock screen wallpaper was a candid photo of Leo, smiling. Ethan explained that Leo had insisted he change it, and that he would get pouty and pretend to be upset if he didn't. Leo blinked, finding it hard to believe he could be so bold in a relationship. He apologized, admitting he truly couldn't remember any of it. Ethan reached out and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from Leo's forehead, his voice softening. He assured him it didn't matter, as long as Leo was still with him. The directness of his affection sent a warmth creeping up Leo's neck, and he instinctively leaned into the touch, feeling like a small, harmless creature seeking comfort. Ethan was everything Leo could have imagined in an ideal partner. He was handsome and accomplished, yet when they were alone, he was gentle and attentive. In the fog of his confusion, this felt like a solid piece of ground to stand on. While Ethan went to speak with the doctor about his condition, Leo pulled out his own phone. He turned on the camera and discreetly snapped a picture of Ethan's back. If Ethan had him as his lock screen, it only seemed fair to return the gesture. Ethan had a natural poise that made every photo look like it was from a magazine shoot. As he happily navigated to his settings to change his wallpaper, he accidentally swiped into his photo gallery and discovered something surprising. There were dozens of photos, all of them of Ethan. Eating in the cafeteria, throwing a football on the field, sitting in a lecture hall. He was obsessed. Leo pressed his lips together, a mix of embarrassment and reassurance washing over him as any lingering doubts about their relationship vanished. At that moment, a gentle pressure on his cheek made him look up. Ethan was back, a small smile playing on his lips as he asked what had him grinning like that. Leo sheepishly showed him his phone, pointing out the vast collection of photos he had of him. Ethan's smile faltered for a second. He stared at the screen, the light in his eyes becoming dark and unreadable. Leo thought he might be upset by the quality of the photos and quickly offered to delete them, apologizing softly so Ethan wouldn't be angry. But Ethan stopped him, his voice regaining its composure. He told him not to delete them, to keep them. He had been worried Leo might not think the photos were any good. Ethan said they looked great because they were proof that somewhere, in a part of his mind he couldn't access, he was loved by Leo. He told Leo it made him incredibly happy. Ethan's voice grew a little thick with emotion, and the intensity in his eyes seemed entirely genuine. Leo felt as though he'd stumbled upon a hidden treasure. He was filled with a sense of relief. It was clear that Ethan cared for him deeply, and he was beginning to feel a powerful pull towards him in return. This realization made the small, romantic part of him feel utterly content, and he allowed Ethan to lead him back to the university campus. When Ethan walked him to his dorm room, however, he found all his roommates were there. Mark, whose desk faced the door, saw him and greeted him with a wide grin, asking where he'd been all day. He said Leo was usually such a goody two-shoes, he couldn't possibly be. His voice trailed off, then shot up several octaves when he saw who was standing behind Leo. "Holy crap, is that Ethan Cole?" His exclamation made the other roommates look up, their expressions a mixture of surprise and confusion. They all seemed to be wondering why the captain of the football team was in their dorm room. Leo turned his head, puzzled, to look at Ethan, who was now standing right beside him. He wondered why his own roommates, the guys he lived with every day, seemed to have no idea about his relationship. He announced plainly that Ethan was his boyfriend, and that it was perfectly normal for him to walk him home. The roommates' faces shifted from confusion to outright shock. One of them asked when he had gotten a boyfriend, and another asked when he had become gay. Another roommate then hesitantly asked if that meant Ethan was also. Seeing their dumbfounded expressions, Leo realized something was terribly wrong. He had just inadvertently outed himself, destroying whatever carefully constructed image he had maintained before his amnesia. The memory loss was proving to be a real menace. Just as he was scrambling for something to say, a large hand firmly grasped his, and he heard Ethan speak in a calm, measured tone. He confirmed that he was indeed Leo's boyfriend. He explained to the roommates that Leo had been afraid they might be homophobic and disapprove, so he had kept it a secret. He told them that if any of them had a problem with it, they could take it up with him, but they were not to bother Leo. Ethan's family was influential, and hardly anyone at the university would dare to cross him. So even though his words were polite, delivered with a faint smile, they carried an undeniable chill. The roommates immediately backpedaled, assuring them it was no problem, just a bit of a shock. One of them invited Ethan to come in and sit down, noting how cold it was outside. Ethan gave a polite nod and led Leo inside as if he owned the place. Seeing his composure, Leo felt his own panic subside. Thank goodness Ethan was there. He wouldn't have known how to handle that on his own. This only made him feel more reliant on Ethan, and his eyes followed him constantly. The young man who was now explaining Leo's memory loss and illness to his roommates suddenly glanced over at him with a half-smile and playfully pinched his cheek. It was a gesture both affectionate and bold, even as his face remained serious while he spoke. He gave the roommates his number, telling them to call him anytime, no matter how late, if Leo felt unwell. The roommates agreed with an almost comical eagerness. Soon after, Ethan said he had to leave. As Leo was debating whether to walk him downstairs, Ethan had already pulled him out of the room, leaving the stunned roommates behind. He followed Ethan down to the quiet courtyard of the men's dorm, his ears still burning with warmth. The air was cool, and very few people were around. Leo told Ethan he should go back and get some rest. Ethan raised an eyebrow, a hint of amusement in his eyes, and asked what Leo was calling him. Leo repeated his name, confused. Ethan told him that wasn't what he used to call him. Leo's eyelashes fluttered as he apologized again, feeling embarrassed by his faulty memory. He asked if Ethan could give him a hint. A slight curve appeared on Ethan's lips. "You called me sir." The intimacy of the word made Leo feel flustered all over again. They were both men, calling him that felt a bit much. He licked his lips, but the shyness kept him from being able to say it. Fortunately, Ethan didn't push him, offering him an out. He said he could call him something else if he preferred. A few terms of endearment flashed through Leo's mind, and he finally settled on one. He tentatively tried bro. There? As soon as the word left his lips, he saw a subtle shift in Ethan's eyes. Then he heard him mutter a curse under his breath, so low it was almost inaudible. "Leo, you're going to be the death of me." Leo blushed and didn't dare say anything more, his gaze darting away. For a split second, he felt like Ethan was about to kiss him. But he didn't. He simply told Leo to get a good night's rest. He said he would pick him up for class in the morning. Leo nodded obediently, and Ethan lingered for a moment, stroking his hair gently as if he were petting a cat. After Ethan turned and walked away, Leo also headed back toward the dorm building. He couldn't resist looking back one more time. He happened to see Ethan stopping by a trash can near the exit of the courtyard, tossing something in. It looked like a crumpled piece of paper, a napkin perhaps. Why would Ethan seem so on edge? First, the inexplicable memory loss, then the sudden appearance of a boyfriend who was far too perfect to be real, followed by an impromptu coming out. It all felt like it was happening at lightning speed. Back in the dorm, he barely had time to feel dazed before his roommates descended on him, their questions fueled by grinning curiosity. But with his mind a blank slate, he had nothing to tell them. After a bit of good-natured teasing, they let him be, telling him to rest. He was secretly relieved that they didn't seem to have a problem with his sexuality. The roller coaster of a day had left him physically and mentally drained, and he fell asleep almost instantly. He dreamed of an Ethan who was completely different from the one he'd met today. In the dream, Ethan wasn't with him. He was the center of a large, adoring crowd, shining and untouchable. Half his face was cast in the orange glow of a setting sun, making him look ethereal. Leo's roommate, Mark, was whispering to him, pointing out the senior, Ethan Cole. He mentioned that Ethan was a top student, came from a wealthy family, and was impossibly handsome. Mark sighed dramatically, complaining about people who were born with every advantage. In the dream, Leo smiled and tried to reply that Ethan was his boyfriend, but no sound came out. As he struggled to speak, Ethan was already walking away, surrounded by his friends, without ever glancing in Leo's direction. He was cold and distant, a stark contrast to the gentle man from the hospital. Leo felt a surge of anxiety. Why was Ethan ignoring him? The scene shifted and he was in the university library. He saw Ethan at the checkout counter, realizing he'd forgotten his student ID. The librarian was stern, refusing to let him borrow the books without it. As the tension mounted, Leo, who had been standing behind him, summoned his courage and held out his own ID card. Ethan took it, a flicker of surprise on his face. He toyed with the card, his gaze sweeping over Leo. His eyes, when they crinkled at the corners, were strikingly beautiful. Meng Ting? He read from the card. Thanks. Leo wanted to say you're welcome, but once again, he was voiceless. Just as he was groaning in frustration, the scene changed again. He was outside the basketball court. A handsome boy was confessing his feelings to Ethan. A crowd of onlookers gasped and whispered, intrigued by the drama. But Ethan, casually dribbling a basketball, didn't even look up. He uttered a single, dismissive word. Scram. The boy's face paled, and he walked away, passing by a stunned Leo on his way out. Just then, Ethan seemed to sense something and finally looked up, his eyes meeting Leo's. His brow furrowed slightly, his expression unreadable. Then he turned and walked away, as if tired of the whole spectacle. But a sour, jealous feeling swelled uncontrollably in Leo's chest. Could these be his lost memories? Or were they just dreams? If they were real, why was Ethan so cold and seemingly homophobic back then? And how did he end up becoming his boyfriend? The tangled mess of questions made his sleep restless until he was gently shaken awake. He was still disoriented. Mark poked him again, pointing out that his forehead was covered in sweat and asking if he felt okay. Leo gasped for air and shook his head, saying it was just a bad dream. That's good, Mark said. Now hurry up. Ethan's been waiting for you downstairs for a while. Ethan? Leo quickly sat up and peered out the window. Sure enough, Ethan was standing by a small flower bed, looking as effortlessly cool as a model in a photo shoot. He was staring intently at the entrance to their dorm building, a pleasant look on his face. Mark sighed theatrically. Man, I don't know how a good guy like you managed to land a player like him. He even brought you breakfast. He added that he never realized gay romance could be so cliché, and wondered how many girls on campus would be crying themselves to sleep with envy. Leo admitted he didn't remember how it happened, but that Ethan had said he was the one who did the chasing. He worried for a moment that it was all a lie. Mark just laughed and said that landing Ethan Cole was a major accomplishment. Leo managed a weak smile, feeling a sense of relief. It seemed last night was just a dream after all, and dreams were often the opposite of reality. The gloom in his heart began to lift. After a quick wash, he hurried downstairs. He apologized to Ethan for oversleeping. The moment Ethan saw him, he straightened up slightly. His voice was relaxed, drawing out the last syllable. Did you forget what you said last night? Leo pursed his lips in embarrassment and whispered, Brother. Ethan seemed satisfied. He raised his hand as if to pat Leo's head, but then noticed the many students passing by on their way to class. His hand paused in midair, and he instead simply smoothed down a tuft of hair that was sticking up on Leo's head. It was a gesture of polite, restrained intimacy. Fueled by the lingering unease from his dream, Leo acted on a sudden impulse. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around Ethan in a hug. Ethan froze for a moment, surprised. "Aren't you afraid of being so open?" he asked softly. Leo knew what he meant. He was worried about the gossip and judgment that could come from such a public display of affection between two men, even in a relatively open-minded environment. Despite the startled glances from passers-by, Leo looked up at him with trust in his eyes. Not afraid. In truth, he was afraid. He was afraid that the cold, distant Ethan from his dream was the real one, someone completely out of his reach. Only by being physically close to him could he chase that fear away. Ethan walked him to the door of his classroom before heading off to his own class. Leo watched his retreating back for a moment before turning to enter the room. Instantly, he felt as if he were under a spotlight. He coughed lightly and slid into his seat, placing the breakfast Ethan had bought for him on his desk. He could hear the low hum of whispers around him, his name and Ethan's being mentioned frequently. The campus gossip mill was brutally efficient. While sipping his orange juice and scrolling through posts on the university's anonymous forum, several classmates came over to ask why he'd been absent yesterday. He couldn't remember their names, but he politely replied that he'd been sick, pretending not to notice the curious glint in their eyes. Thankfully, the professor arrived and the chatter died down. But throughout the lecture, he could still feel people occasionally looking his way. He ignored them, calmly waiting for class to end so he could find Ethan. But as soon as the class was dismissed, just as he was about to stand up, he was blocked by a tall, broad-shouldered guy. "Leo, if you were gay all along, why did you pretend to reject me?" The statement immediately silenced the room. The students who had been packing their bags slowed down. The sound of texting fingers accelerated, as if everyone was broadcasting the latest drama. Under the weight of everyone's stares, Leo looked up at the boy, completely baffled. Generic face, thick neck. He couldn't remember him at all. He must not have been important. After all, even with amnesia, he felt he would remember someone so graceless. So he responded politely, "Who are you?" The boy was taken aback, and his face twisted with anger. He accused Leo of playing innocent and pretending not to know him, then spat that he was just a gold digger shamelessly clinging to Ethan's money. No matter how patient Leo was, he understood now that this person was just looking for a fight. His expression turned cold. He set down his bag, preparing for a confrontation, when a familiar lazy voice came from the classroom doorway. "I'd be lucky if he'd cling to me. What's it to you?" The aggressive boy instantly deflated, like a rooster with its neck wrung. He opened his mouth to say something else, but one look at Ethan's unsmiling face made him turn and leave in a hurry. Leo quickly grabbed Ethan's bag and trotted over to him. He worried about how much Ethan had overheard and whether he would misunderstand. He lowered his eyes, wanting to explain about the guy, but Ethan asked him a different question entirely. "Sweetheart, are you hungry?" Leo looked up, confused for a second. "Huh?" Ethan smiled. "Then come with your brother. I'll treat you to something good." After a moment of silence, Leo looked up and gave him a trusting smile. "Okay." Ethan believed him. He was so good to him. As he followed Ethan out of the classroom, his heart fluttering, they ran into several of Ethan's friends, who greeted them with knowing grins. One of them clapped Ethan on the back, telling Leo that his dream had finally come true. He said he thought it was just locker room talk, but that Ethan had been serious. He introduced himself as Ethan's roommate and said that despite his reputation, Ethan was actually a very reserved guy. Ever since he saw Leo in the library, he'd been obsessed, constantly trying to engineer a chance encounter. Another friend chimed in, laughing, saying that Ethan even mumbled Leo's name in his sleep but was too chicken to actually confess. Ethan, looking annoyed, told them to get lost if they had nothing better to say. His friends laughed, saying they wouldn't interrupt their date, and quickly made their exit, calling out goodbyes to Leo. Leo listened with a soft smile, his heart melting. So that was what Ethan was like in private. He tugged on the sleeve of the boy next to him and couldn't help but ask why Ethan hadn't just confessed to him directly in the first place. Ethan took his hand, lacing their fingers together as they walked. He replied calmly, "I thought you were homophobic." It all clicked into place. It was a misunderstanding. That's why he'd resorted to a secret crush. But it didn't matter now. They were together. Ignoring the curious or judgmental looks from other students, Leo leaned happily against him. Their relationship continued, sweet and intimate. The buzz about them on the campus forum was soon overshadowed by the looming pressure of final exams, which was a relief to Leo. At last, they weren't the main topic of conversation. But as time went on, a small seed of confusion began to grow. He noticed that Ethan rarely initiated much physical contact. They held hands and he would touch his hair, but hugs were rare, and they had never kissed. He wondered if Ethan preferred a more platonic relationship. But that didn't make sense. The way Ethan looked at him was anything but platonic, filled with a heat that was impossible to miss. Leo was too embarrassed to bring it up. He couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan was holding back, leaving an escape route for both of them. He wondered what Ethan was afraid of. The question gnawed at him, causing him a few sleepless nights. One evening, Ethan's roommate was celebrating his birthday, and Ethan took him along to a party at an off-campus house. The place was lively, filled with the loud chatter of college students. The attention in the room naturally gravitated towards Ethan, who was the most striking person there. Leo sat beside him, his mind wandering, and absently took a sip of the drink in his hand. It was just one small sip, but he immediately felt his head start to spin. He realized too late that he must be a lightweight. He covered his face, feeling unwell, and fell silent. Ethan quickly noticed something was wrong and asked if he'd been drinking. Leo managed a slow nod. In his hazy state, he heard Ethan chuckle, then turned to say something to his roommates, which elicited a round of good-natured laughter. The next thing he knew, he was being lifted. He was on someone's back, broad and strong, with a familiar, pleasant scent that made him feel safe and sleepy. When he came to again, he was sitting on the edge of his bed in his quiet, empty dorm room. His boyfriend, Ethan, was kneeling in front of him, carefully taking off his shoes. The position felt strangely intimate, making his already foggy head feel even more muddled. He couldn't help but call his name. "Ethan." "HM?" Ethan just raised his eyelids to glance at him. Even in his intoxicated state, Leo had the presence of mind to correct himself. "Brother, what is it? Are you feeling sick?" Ethan asked. Leo shook his head and whispered, "No, I just want to do something." "What is it?" Ethan stood up and sat on the bed beside him. When he narrowed his eyes, he had a captivating intensity. Leo looked at him dazedly, his gaze drifting downwards until it landed on Ethan's lips. As they say, alcohol gives you courage. He voiced the thought that was consuming him. "I want to kiss you. Is that okay?" The room fell completely silent. The heat in Ethan's eyes intensified, so hot that Leo felt his own neck flush. He waited, but Ethan made no move. Thinking he was waiting for him to take the lead, Leo leaned in. But just as their lips were about to meet, a single long finger pressed gently against his forehead, stopping him. Then he heard Ethan's slightly hoarse voice. "Leo, no." He murmured something about being greedy. Leo blinked, confused, not understanding what he meant. Ethan seemed to say something else, but the drunkenness finally won, and with a soft sigh, he slumped over and fell asleep. He vaguely felt someone carefully tucking him in. It was nice having a boyfriend, even if he couldn't get close to him. The next morning, he woke up staring at the ceiling, dazed. Then, the events of the previous night came rushing back. He slowly curled into a ball under the covers, groaning silently. What had he done? He had tried to force himself on Ethan. But what was even more embarrassing than his failed attempt at being a bad boy was that Ethan had rejected him. The shame made him want to buy a one-way ticket to another planet. After the wave of mortification passed, he started to wonder again. Why did Ethan reject him? Was he just playing with him? The thought made him incredibly sad. He decided to get out of bed and wash his face, but as he swung his legs over the side, his foot caught on a stray textbook. He lost his balance and tumbled to the floor, hitting his head hard on the linoleum. He hissed in pain. The dorm was empty. As he struggled to push himself up, a wave of dizziness washed over him. It felt like a floodgate had opened in his mind, and a torrent of memories poured in, chaotic and overwhelming. His vision blurred, then went black. When he woke up again, he was in the hospital. His roommate, Mark, was sitting beside him. "Dude, you're finally awake," Mark said. Leo's head was pounding. "Mark, why am I in the hospital?" Mark explained that they had come back from an all-nighter at the library and found him unconscious on the floor. He assured him the doctor said it was just a minor concussion. "Your boyfriend will be here any minute," he added. Leo rubbed his forehead, confused. "My boyfriend? What boyfriend?" Now it was Mark's turn to be dumbfounded. He reminded him about his boyfriend, Ethan Cole, the campus heartthrob. He said they were just out together the other night. "Ethan? He's my boyfriend?" Leo was completely stunned, and the pain in his head intensified. Two different sets of memories were colliding, making it impossible to tell what was real. Just then, a hurried figure appeared in the doorway of the ward. It was Ethan, his handsome face creased with worry. Seeing Leo sitting up, he let out a sigh of relief. He immediately crossed the room and pulled him into a hug, his voice deep with concern. The clean, familiar scent of him filled Leo's senses, and his brain felt like it was short-circuiting. Ethan murmured that he should have stayed with him last night, asking if he was still feeling unwell. "Baby. Baby?" Ethan called him baby. The roaring in his head grew louder, and his heart pounded against his ribs. Mark chuckled from the side. "I'll leave you two alone," he said, then added, "By the way, Ethan, Leo seemed a little out of it just now. He forgot he even had a boyfriend." With that, Mark tactfully left the room. Ethan, who was still holding Leo, went completely still. After a moment, he slowly released him, creating a polite distance between them. Leo looked up at him and saw that his usually confident face was filled with a mixture of annoyance and confusion, a far cry from his usual carefree demeanor. He asked Leo in a strained voice, "Leo, do you remember?" Leo nodded, his face grim. "I remember. Pretty much all of it." He remembered his secret, long-standing crush on Ethan. He remembered being too afraid to confess, thinking Ethan was straight. He remembered saving Ethan's contact information under the name boyfriend as a small, private indulgence. And he remembered how, after his accident, he had mistaken his own fantasy for reality. He had laid his feelings bare, and Ethan, instead of correcting him or scorning him, had simply accepted the role. He had been so kind, had told him he liked him, and had even coaxed him into calling him brother. The memory of it all was excruciatingly embarrassing. He opened his mouth, wanting to ask something, to confirm, but he didn't know where to begin. "I'm sorry," Ethan said suddenly, his gaze fixed on him. Leo's eyelashes trembled. It's okay. It was my fault." A heavy silence fell between them. Then Ethan made a soft TSK sound. He moved closer again, his expression intense, almost paranoid. "Leo, so, can we still be together?" Leo avoided his gaze, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know." He truly didn't. He didn't know how to face Ethan now. Before the amnesia, he'd had a crush. After, he thought Ethan liked him back and became his boyfriend. The experience had been euphoric, but now it felt unreal and tinged with guilt. He wanted to wait until his head was completely clear before they talked properly. It was the only way to be fair to both of them. Ethan must have sensed his discomfort because he didn't push him, but his eyes remained direct and searing. After Leo was discharged, Ethan continued to bring him breakfast every morning and meet him after class. When Leo casually mentioned a snack he'd seen on TikTok, Ethan spent half a day driving to the other side of the city to get it for him. When his shoelace came undone while they were walking across the quad, Ethan knelt down in front of everyone and tied it for him, completely unfazed by the stares. It made Leo blush and his heart race. He felt like a rabbit being stalked by a very patient predator. Ethan's bold yet gentle pursuit reignited the campus gossip forum. Were they broken up? Why hadn't anyone seen them holding hands lately? Someone commented that this was even more intense than a normal relationship. It was a full-on public courtship. Another user posted, begging for Leo to hold a masterclass on how to tame a campus god. Someone else posted that they'd just been fed dog food by the two of them at Miller's Pond. They saw Leo get something in his eye, and Ethan had looked so worried he was about to steal him away on the spot. 5 seconds later, that comment was deleted by the forum administrator. Coincidentally, Ethan was the administrator. When Mark showed him all of this, he couldn't help but ask what was going on between him and Ethan. He said people were constantly asking him if they had broken up. At that moment, Leo was reading a text from Ethan. He lowered the corners of his mouth slightly. "We didn't break up, but we're not together either," he replied, sounding dejected. Mark looked utterly confused. Leo told him the whole story, from the amnesia to the reveal, wanting an outside perspective. After listening, Mark marveled at Ethan's elaborate scheme but then offered a simple piece of advice. He said that since they both liked each other, the convoluted process of how they got here didn't really matter. The most important thing was the result. Mark's words were a revelation. Leo had always believed that the journey of falling in love was more important than the destination. But looking at it from another angle, if he and Ethan both had feelings for each other, why were they wasting so much time? They could just be happy together. With his mind made up, he planned to have a serious talk with Ethan, to confess properly. But before he could, Ethan invited him on a camping trip with a few of his roommates and close friends. The group of guys were all good-natured and spent the entire trip playfully teasing him and Ethan, clearly trying to push them together. Leo went along with it, smiling at their antics. Whenever the teasing got a little too intense, he would subconsciously glance at Ethan, who would then shut his friends down with a playful kick or a stern look, which only made them tease him more. That night, as they sat around the campfire playing Truth or Dare, the bottle landed on Leo. The boys all shared a wicked grin and dared him and Ethan to go into the nearby woods and stay there alone for 10 minutes. It was the camping equivalent of 7 minutes in heaven. Leo pursed his lips, then stood up and walked toward the dark tree line without a word. He soon heard familiar footsteps following behind him. The woods at night were quiet and dark, the only sounds being their breathing and the faint glow of the campfire behind them. When he felt they had gone far enough, he stopped, planning to use this opportunity to finally talk to Ethan. But Ethan spoke first, calling his name. "Leo." His back straightened, and he slowly turned to face him. In the dim light, Ethan's handsome features were half hidden in shadow. "What?" Ethan gestured vaguely. "There were some buzzing insects over there," he said, acting strangely. "Come here." Leo replied that he was a guy and wasn't afraid of a few bugs, but he still found himself moving closer to him. As he did, his foot caught on a protruding tree root, and he stumbled forward, falling directly into Ethan. Ethan's arms shot out, catching him and pulling him into a firm embrace. His cool, fresh scent filled Leo's nose. He steadied himself and quickly thanked him. "Being polite is boring." Ethan's voice was low and playful. "How about some practical action instead?" He wanted to push him away, asking what he wanted to do. "I want to kiss you." Leo remembered how Ethan had refused him before, so he deliberately said no. Ethan didn't say anything, just looked down at him. Leo's resolve softened and he stammered, "Fine. Okay then." But just as he was about to tilt his face up to meet his, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Branches shook, leaves rained down, and a low rumbling sound filled the air.